everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is our call for the month of July. We have already hit almost halfway through the year. I can't believe it. Everything is going. We're somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm here to introduce to you Roger, and he will introduce one of our amazing speakers today. So as you guys know, Roger's a renowned futurist, social entrepreneur, and the creator of Wealth Dynamics. I think most of you know about that by now because you all have these kind of tools and tests to use. But really one of his big things for us is he's such an amazing visionary that integrates technology, education, community, and he fosters this ecosystem where we have purpose-driven individuals and businesses and entrepreneurs and children and education and everybody, which we all just thrive. So welcome, Roger. Hello. And yes, I will leave you to introduce our speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle, and we'll be hearing back from Michelle in a little bit as we go through the Shine Awards for this coming month. Yeah, and we have Stuart Lacey, who is on here, although he's got a bit of a flu from the sounds of it, or some other bug he's picked up along the way. Hey, Stuart, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Roger. I'm actually in Almaty in Kazakhstan today, and just loving the people here and the opportunity. It's an extraordinary country.
Yeah, well, we're going to hear more about that because that's all part and parcel of what we're going to be talking about. The reason that you're actually out there is largely because it's, I think, the first trip you've had out to Kazakhstan. Is that correct?
That's right. First trip out, and Salim Ismail and myself from OpenEXO have had an extraordinary few days out here. We were hosted by the New Vision event, and they've run an incredible conference here about the future of Kazakhstan in digital technology and AI. And it was also hosted and supported by the YPO Young Presidents Organization here in Kazakhstan, who were very gracious hosts and deeply committed to the future. So really good partnerships we're building.
It's very cool. I'm just going to share this as, and I'm going to introduce you formally, Stuart, and we can jump right into this. Here is a post I did on Twitter. A big week at Genius with Salim Ismail presenting at the AI Ready workshop. We did the launch of Abu Dhabi and Dubai Genius Cities, and there was also the New Vision conference with the YPO, which you heard Stuart just talk about. Here we are on the steps of Abu Dhabi University, which is the #1 university in UAE, and you can see us all here basically getting ready. There's Stuart, there's Salim in the middle. As we were getting ready for the AI Ready workshop. It looks like a great production took place in Almaty here. And this was actually a really interesting picture, which we're going to hear more about as well, which is what already our subsidiary company of Genius is doing within Kazakhstan, working together with the government, where they're really looking at building an AI nation, more than just the Genius City concept. This is more like the Genius Nation concept. And this is all part and parcel of what we're going to be talking about here, which is how do you 10x? And 10x is about exponential growth. So how do you 10x? How do you 10x your business? How do you 10x your ecosystem? How do you even 10x the economy of a country? And this is exactly the kind of things that Salim and Stuart have already been doing within EXO, and now with AI, obviously it accelerates things even further. So Stuart is the Chief Growth Officer of OpenEXO, but he has had an ongoing, very similar to many of us, an ongoing history of both running companies as well as being a thought leader. So he's the author of the Formula for Luck. Many of you know that I have a long-running history as well with basically how luck and flow and synchronicity all interconnect together. And so this is a really interesting part we're going to be jumping into a little bit here as well. And then you see here as well that he has been building a number of different companies, in fact, even organizations, regional chair of YPO. I believe that you were leading one of the most successful parts of YPO in terms of the different groups as they were growing. CEO, or part of the Summit Group. Many of you, I think, know about the Summit Group, which is serving entrepreneurs through events. And then also, I love this one, being appointed as the first male in history of the Women's Business Network Board, serving over 2,000 female CEOs. And then a writer across many, many different platforms and a speaker as well. So I would love for you to start, Stuart, given that we had Salim on here, talking about basically the origins of OpenEXO, how that all was going as well. So before we even get into the whole conversation about where we're now moving with AI and how we go about 10xing, I would love for you to maybe just share the origin story of how you connected up with Salim and how that then linked into your journey.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate the chance to share it. It's a great story. So when I wind back, I was actually launching one of my high ratio, high speed startups funded out of Silicon Valley. And it was all about the future of your data, you know, how you own your data, not Google and Facebook. And Salim and I started crossing stages all the time, speaking and sharing the stage. In fact, I'd actually attended Singularity University, where, you know, he was a co-founder. And through that period of time, one of the things that we see that AI and data is driving in terms of the future. Singularity and his first edition of exponential organizations really defined the framework and the pathway that helps organizations at scale go from linear to exponential growth. And where we had an interesting crossover at the same time is, as you mentioned, with the work that you and I both love about luck, I'd actually written a book published by Forbes called The Formula for Luck, which is really how human beings went exponential. And so we had this mind meld, and Salim actually wrote the foreword for my book, and we became very good friends and co-conspirators, I guess, if you will, in trying to have impact at scale. When I was working with YPO and Summit and everyone, we stayed very close, and I had a brief respite, probably about 4 weeks, which, as you know, when you come off being a CEO, you usually want a tiny bit of more time. But Slim reached out immediately and said, Stuart, there are some incredible things happening over at OpenEXO, especially with the merger with Genius Group. And are you available to lean in? And I laughed and I said, well, you know, we've been wanting to work together closely for almost a decade now. If now's the time, now's the time. And so I said yes, which is very much one of my traits. I'm an all-in kind of guy. And in less than a month, I was full on, you know, supporting and growing. I love this community. I love the change agency that it provides. We've got a very large, vibrant community, almost 40,000 members. But what I think most importantly is when you work with organizations and help them change their mindset from one where they're just trying to survive to one where they can thrive, it really is a joy to go to work every day. So I feel really happy in the role, and I'm loving the opportunity. That's
fantastic. Very, very cool. Well look, let's start with this whole concept of luck and what made you write that book. I'm going to share a quick story here because our world is moving at pace where some people are seeing their luck seem to decrease, while other people are seeing their luck massively increase at the moment. And you know, there's a very interesting concept which Buckminster Fuller has. We talk about Buckminster Fuller a lot in terms of where we are in the world right now, and one of his concepts is something called lag, where he says lag is the time between thought and manifestation, where if you are on purpose and doing what you meant to do, then the lag could be seconds. You have an idea about something that you need, and suddenly the phone goes and it's exactly what you needed. Whereas if you're not on purpose, if you're on the wrong path, then what happens is lag can, you know, could be years or never, right? That you basically think, I'd love to have this, and it just never happens. And it's almost always about the giving, not the getting, right? If he's like, I want $1 million, well, good luck with that. Whereas if you actually say, look, I really want to make an impact, and if I had an opportunity to have X, Y, Z, it would actually allow me to do ABC, then everything really starts to evolve and grow. Reason I've got this site up here, this is Nuanu City, which is the best example of a genius city, and the idea that if AI and exponential technologies can allow us to, as humans, to be able to actually enhance ourselves through humanity, then how great would that be? And the idea of actually having a city location, which is actually something Salim, you know, like was talking about even before we started talking about genius cities, this idea that you would have a place to go where humanity could actually be more conscious. By the way, these images you see here, it's not a coincidence they look like Burning Man, because they're by the same sculptors that actually do some of the most iconic sculptures in Burning Man as well. Nuanu City here is actually based in Bali. It just so happened, totally by luck, that as we were looking for a spot where we could have a new base in Bali, we basically came across Nuanu on the very, very first day, met Sergey, who's the founder of Nuanu, You can see here the kids' education, the whole basis from the center of it is that if you actually put humanism and the concept that, you know, humans are meant not to be doing a day's work, but their life's work, which means it's all about, you know, what is meaningful work to move forward? How do you use technology to aid you to do that? It's all technology driven. So even the mayor is going to be an AI mayor, and it's basically, you know, right on the coast of Nuanu, where the center of it is a beach club, and then you've then got the schools, and then you've got all the co-working spaces, and this is coming up in a couple of weeks. It's called Swara Festival, which is almost like a mini Burning Man. But then it also has next month CoinFest, which is the biggest cryptocurrency and Bitcoin festival happening in Asia, all within this area as well. And just by total coincidence that we actually met up and now, you know, looking to partner with them with our own Genius City in Bali, as well as what we're doing elsewhere, where it's not just about the software, it's about the hardware as well. It's about how do you actually redesign a city from scratch, which a number of different countries are now starting to do. And in fact, already, you know, having conversations in UAE with Abu Dhabi and Dubai about doing something similar there as well, which is very, very exciting. But this all happened like where some things have taken like years, like our IPO on the New York Stock Exchange took over 2 years when it should have taken 6 months, just because of what was happening with the timing of the markets and everything like that. But then something like this happens within 1 day, right? And so we're living this, we're experiencing it, where all of the right opportunities are showing up right now. I'd love for you to share your own experience with luck, why you chose to write a book about it, and how could someone who's feeling they're not being so lucky get themselves into the right zone where they start attracting more synchronicities to themselves again?
Well, thank you, Roger. And the story actually is shared in the book, but the very brief version is I had a very difficult youth, heavily bullied, moved countries, skipped a grade, young, small. And instead of choosing to fight back against bullies, I built what I at the time didn't understand was just basically a different operating system of how I interacted with humans. And it had extraordinary outcomes. And as I started to codify that in my life, it led me to a significant amount of success, not just business-wise, but really so relationshiply. The network synapse connectivity, to your point, the velocity of that connectivity and the return of energy became quite remarkable, to the point that some third parties started to, you know, acknowledging, including Inc. magazine and Forbes, like, Stuart, how do you do this? Like, what is it? And it was a serendipitous afternoon when the editor of Forbes, editor of Inc. said, Stuart, would you write the article with us? And I did. And then Forbes picked it up and said, write the book. And what we've realized is the following, is that really luck doesn't happen to you, but you happen to luck. And what we've also realized is that work done by Carol Dweck of the fixed growth mindset, which is 20 years old, and she's done incredible work, but it stops short of explaining our world. And it needed an upgrade and a reboot to really look at how do individuals and corporations and societies really prosper in today's world. And when you debase it really down to the most core understanding, Roger, we get to energy. There's an energistic view of the world, which, you know, Einstein knew all about. And actually, we've studied Einstein's readings and research. And he actually debased even matter to energy. If you remember, matter is literally energy. It's just a very, very low pulse. And so what we know about energy is that energy doesn't disappear or get created. It just moves forms. That energy will tend to, you know, if you send it into an area like hot water into a cold tub, it'll dissipate and normalize. So energy flows. And this is where flow theory and everything comes from. And I think what happens in a growth mindset world is too many people led their lives, Roger, thinking that if you had a tennis ball and you threw it against a wall, that every wall is 180 degrees, meaning that all the energy put out, you expected the immediate return. I'll only do this if I get this in return. It's a very transactional world, and one in which you're not really dealing with the other person's humanity. You're just dealing with in a transactional, I'm actually only doing it because of what I get. Yeah. And when you start to live your life where that wall is everything but 180 degrees, it's angled every which way, but you still put the energy out and it's just going elsewhere. It's rebounding at different angles everywhere. What happens is you start to look at your energy actually notionally dropping, which is okay, as long as you're careful with it, but pushing energy out, giving, investing in others, doing all the things like a pay it forward kind of approach, really doing it for a bigger reason and a bigger purpose. but that energy you put out doesn't disappear. It fills all these other areas. And because you now have a deficit, it returns. And it's the easiest way to explain it because it's just physics ultimately, but you have to be aware of that return. And so even people like Bill Gates says, I've lived an extraordinarily lucky life, and every time luck showed up, I welcomed it, but I almost always put myself there, meaning that there's this deterministic place of putting yourself in a position and then being aware enough of that return and then knowing what to do with it and doing something with it quickly enough. And so we decompress that into 10 principles. The book is a kind of a working manual to do that. We've got a mechanism to actually measure luck, and then workbooks and exercises to actually help learn from a business and personal perspective. But I think when it comes down to it, we interact in a more humanistic way with other people, where it's more about what can I give before what can I get, and how you nurture your networks. And I think this shouldn't be a surprise to any listener today. When you really show up with your genuine best for another human being, not in request of something, but just there to really show up, empathetically listen, kindly care, and support them in their journey, their return to you is almost always 5 or 10x of what it would have otherwise been if they thought you were showing up with an ask, like, what do you want? So I think the starting point is any relationship is, what can I give? How can I support? And to be open to that return. So that's kind of the foundational point. Obviously, we can spend more time on it, but I think if our viewers start there, they can immediately start to think differently. It's not like manifest, Think and Grow Rich, a great book, but you're not going to manifest a bag of gold and it's going to show up at your door. That isn't what this is about. This is really about understanding the way in which you interact on a universal modality with all the people and organizations around you, and your awareness of your role in that.
Yeah, I love the story of Earl Nightingale with The Stranger's Secret, right? Which is really what started Nightingale Conan when he first had Conan put that on the radio. And there's 2 parts to it. The first one's definition of success. The second one is how vibration creates attraction. And that second part is what basically Rhonda Byrne turned into The Secret. And then of course that became this massive thing where everyone's like, oh, you just have to go out there and vibrate your way to $1 million or whatever. But it misses the whole first part, which is everything you just said about creating a deficit or creating a vacuum, right? Like by giving in such a way that it comes back. It's a bit like a footballer. Yeah, you got the ball. What can you do? You can try and score a goal with that ball, or you can just pass it to someone else, right? And of course, the more you pass it to other people, it's natural they start passing it back to you, right? Especially if you're able to pass it, get in a better position, such that they want to pass it back, right? And so it's all about, oh, we're on the same team, and now it's better for you to pass the ball back to me than elsewhere. And other people can see that too. And before you know it, you're getting the ball all the time in a way that the person who holds onto the ball, thinking it's the only ball he's got, never gets anyone passing him anything, right? And so that whole aspect of basically that, as you say, transformational versus transactional, and creating that, the well, Nightingale talks about it. He says that the definition of success, the true definition of success, is the ongoing pursuit of a worthy cause, right? It's the fact that you're part of a game, was part of something bigger than yourself, where other people want to come play as well, right? And the bigger you make that game, the faster you can create that vacuum, right? And actually, it's very interesting because we're seeing people out there today, the Elon Musk of the world, doing this at scale, right? And because more and more people are now conscious to actually want to be basically around those people that have got a bigger cause, it's not just that you're attracting customers, you're now attracting investors, you're now attracting talent. In fact, it's very difficult to have the best people come and work with you if you're not doing something which is actually bigger than yourself, right? Because why would they when they've got so much choice out there at the moment? And I'd love to make a distinction of this with your experience and what you're already seeing around the world, because you did the first AI ready workshop, and we designed it, and then Salim, basically delivered that in Las Vegas, and then we just did the one in Abu Dhabi. And if we were to think of if we were to think about the difference of flow and hustle, right? It's like I talk about this a lot because America's had a very long history of a hustle culture, and it's had some influencers and speakers who would just go, you got to hustle like crazy, like just outwork everybody. And the analogy I give about how hustle is the opposite of nature is, if you think of a surfer on a wave, yes, you have to hustle by paddling to get on the wave, but you didn't go out to paddle. You went out to surf. So yeah, you might have to go against the wave to some extent to just position yourself. That's the hustle. But if you don't find yourself surfing pretty soon after that, which is flow, right? It's like basically tapping into nature, tapping into the energy, then you're absolutely doing something wrong. You know, the stories today of Jensen Huang with NVIDIA, where he's like, yeah, we've been going for 20 years hustling, right? But basically it was all positioning for the right time. And then when he saw the ability to use his GPUs for gaming, he took it. When he saw the ability to use it for AI, you know, that iconic photo of him being, you know, delivering the very first of the NVIDIA chips to the OpenAI site with Elon Musk being there. And then from there, the whole thing took off, and now he's on the wave. That whole aspect of the fact that with technology, with exponential technology especially, the waves are 10 times bigger than they ever were before, which means you're 10 times more likely to get wiped out, right? And be unlucky if you don't get that there are these waves that you can surf. But you get yourself onto these waves, and your luck can also go up exponentially because of the others that are getting on these as well. And this is why we're seeing, we're going to see the first trillionaires for sure. We're already seeing $1 trillion companies, right? This is all basically where we're heading at the moment. So I'd love for you to speak maybe your experience of what you're already seeing in terms of how people are reframing the problems they're looking to solve, and then solving or looking to solve them, you know, especially with this age of AI. Even just using that whole concept that as the waves get bigger, the stakes get higher, basically.
It's a really good question, and I'm thinking through the answer. It wasn't, for the audience, this wasn't a prep question, so I love this. I love these conversations where I can actually think for a minute. What I love about the way you think about the wave amplitude and frequency is, again, that's very energistic. If you think about it, that's all the waves are. And when you think about our role in it, I do think that right now we are in a period of such extraordinary change. I mean, just one data point, Slim talks about these 20 or so Gutenberg moments we're going through, and they're stacked by different levels of doubling. But, for people who are on the call who don't remember the power of exponential, if you double a piece of paper, you fold a single sheet of paper, into 2, into 4, into 8, into 16, how many folds does 42 folds take you, right? And people always misunderstand, but it takes you to the moon, and 60 folds takes you to the sun. So when you're doubling, we're not built as human beings to necessarily witness and understand that doubling effect. And as you move up the stack, trillion times. I don't know, but that wave, no matter how we were to look at that, we have to, as human beings, understand how is our role given that scale and speed of change. So I think our role number one is awareness and understanding. And I think what happens in a lot of organizations is they have what we've called at OpenEXO the immune system. That is this natural tendency of fear or worry or concern about, we've just made this big decision, we're pot committed, we made a lot of commitment to this, and now the cheese moved, and I'm a blind and I can't adapt to the new cheese direction, so I'm just going to double down on a mistake, and that's terrible. I see a lot of people in today's world, we don't have the resources, the time, or they have a very slow legacy process. And that I'm going to spend $1 million with a Big Four accountancy as a consultant. By the time the report is generated, the world changed. At a 2.5 doubling, the world's changed 16x by that point. So the report is redundant by the time it's delivered, right? We need to be way more agile, way more flexible, and work in a much more of what we call a swarm and sprint process, which is these short, agile levels. Now, AI enables that. AI Ready was designed as a platform for our community, originally a service to our own members, not as an externalized offering, just to help all of our members figure out, how do I get ahead? How do I understand my readiness? Where do I start? What tooling do I have? What are my risks? What are the best use cases? And in order to do that well, we realized it had to be data-based, data metric. We have AI built in helping do the work. And as a result, it's a 10-day sprint, and they can get all of that value with heat maps and triage and insights and mapping against EXO and everything in only 10 days. And that was done just as a service offering to help. And then obviously, again, in a luck format, we did the right thing, committed to our members. And many of them came back and said, this blows away anything else I've ever done. Can we offer it? Can we help spread we've got people we're working with that need it. And so we said, sure, we can co-brand it. Why not? Like, let's get it out there. And then that has rolled out now to be a part of how we also launch Genius Cities and everything, because organizations around the world have some fear about where they go next and in what order. And this is really a design structure to do that. I think when you drill it down, though, one of the things that you talked about at the beginning, and I just want to point back to on the luck thing and on what we do, is that, you know, OpenEXO believes in these massive transformative purpose. The thing you put at the top, Elon, you talked about, Google, organize the world's information. We align ourselves to these really, really high-end big things. Look at, like, you know, NVIDIA, et cetera. And I think human beings need those alignments as well, that big purpose, that Maslow's hierarchy, that thing that we really align to. Once you know, and you have, that's a Simon Sinek why, for example, like, that's so many pieces, you put it together and it's obvious what we should be doing. It's just many organizations aren't. Once you have that, the next challenge is, where do I go, in what order, and how do I prioritize my time and treasure and the opportunities? And what we've seen are 3 primary use cases in AI, and I'll share them, and that might spur some conversation. Dive, survive, and thrive. There are literally some organizations, fortunately not many, but they're dive. The change is such that their business model won't survive this AI move. And in fact, we worked with someone just about 9 months ago who realized that, exited their company, sold it to a competitor, and now 9 months later is effectively buying it back for cents on the dollar. So that was a dive, but thank goodness they were aware enough to recognize the dive and do something about it.
Yeah.
Survive is this linear world. These are companies that want to grow 3-5% a year. We're just trying to eke out an efficiency. And in a world of exponential change, when you're going to the moon in paper folds, surviving is not a plan. But there are just way too many companies that are in survival mode. And what we need to do, and what we focus all of our energy around utilizing, whether it's AI or the OpenEXO framework, is how to thrive. And that is this 10x world. And that is thinking in an exponential approach, not a singular 2 to 3 or 5% approach. And the results of that are compelling. We have 40x higher shareholder returns for organizations that go through our process, 7% higher profitability, 11% higher use of assets. I mean, it's you know, it's compelling and data proven, and as a result, it's doable.
I think it's very funny. I hadn't heard you use the dive, survive, thrive, like, you know, 3 elements before, but it's funny because we have sink, swim, and surf, which is very similar. And most people are talking about sink or swim, right? It's like one or the other, but the surf is the 3rd option, which most people don't get. They can be doing, and but 100% the same thing. And what I would love to do is take people through a process while we're on this call together on those 3 things. You also mentioned earlier the whole, you know, swarm, sprint, scale, right? Like how those elements work. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to basically just give people a whistle-stop tour of what we shared here. So just so everyone knows, while this happened in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, we're running this every 3 months, right? So basically, we've got Salim, Stuart, who co-presented this, and Salim, you know, did a whole section on exponentials. Stuart did a whole section on AI. And what is really key here is that there is so much in common between the way we've set up our community and network globally within Genius and the way that EXO has done it as well. So combining the 2 is not actually that difficult at all. And the steps that we went through, as you can see here, you know, first of all, Awake, which is just waking everyone to the both opportunities and risks of what's happening with the AI age, the EXO survey together with the AI Ready survey that we took, and then from there, how to build a roadmap on all of this. I just want to share this so everyone gets a sneak peek of basically the workbook that we actually went through, because this also gives some really great case studies at the end, where in this workbook, we basically went through, and by the way, as we're launching each of our different Genius Cities, we're going to be doing it in partnership with local universities as well, because that's kind of like a hotbed of learning, and we can be connecting smart students and the whole incubator concept that universities have together with what we're doing within companies. But basically in here, after going through the EXO model, which I'm going to come back to in a moment, because this is very much about the swarm part. Like, do you have a garden which allows you to be able to go exponential in the first place, right? I always like to say that if you have bottlenecks in your business, it's probably because you've designed your business as a bottle, right? Like any hierarchy is a bottle. It's always going to have bottlenecks. But if you have a network structure instead of a hierarchy structure, like something much more decentralized, which is exactly what happens within this model here, as we're going to see in a moment. It gives you something very, very different, which is basically all the ideas come from the bottom up. A really great example of this, which I love, is what Peter Diamandis created with the X Prize, which Salim is on the board of as well, where they effectively said, look, let's make it a game. Let's create a challenge. Let's all learn from each other. We'll still reward the winners, but everyone wins, right? Like we actually end up being able to solve some grand challenge because everyone basically is in it for the incentive of doing better and having friendly competition with others that also care about the same thing as well. That's a perfect example of a swarm, which is getting the people together that get it without having to try and convince everyone. And then the sprint, which is, okay, you've got a limited amount of time to get to a certain result, right? And if you do that effectively in the right way, which is what we do with our micro schools, what we're doing with our AI challenge, then basically there's a really good reason for people to get involved. And you learn all the way through that without feeling like learning is hard work, right? And then the scaling is how do you take that concept and now, basically scale it throughout your organizations or frankly, throughout an entire ecosystem or economy to build that out as well. So we went through the surveys, the AI Ready quiz, to see where basically we could actually have the highest impact of using AI within our business. And also within this workbook, we had the aspect of the final exam, which all of you have heard me talk about in terms of Buckminster Fuller saying, humanity itself is in this final exam right now. Elon Musk is now saying the same thing, as is pretty much anyone on the AI side. If anyone has been watching any of Jeff Hinton's more recent talks, where he's like saying, okay, I'm also going towards AI safety now, because we have to be much, much more careful about how humans actually fit into this equation of superintelligence, right? And what Buckminster Fuller talked about was the world game, which is let's create a solution to the final exam, which is fun, which everyone wants to play, a world game that all of humanity can play together. And that's really what the basis of the Genius Cities is, which is, okay, if we can have all these different companies that are looking to 10x, they can share their best stories. We're going to give Genius Awards to the winners. And then basically for those who are the best examples, just like in the X Prize, you've now got an X Prize for your own company, where basically you can then tap into an AI marketplace, you can tap into AI tools, you can tap into AI training that's going to enable you to be learning as you're earning, right? As you're growing as well. And so this basically is the whole concept as we go. And we now have got a full roadmap, which we're rolling out, where basically the next AI micro school is happening in a week's time. That's our AI influence micro school. The AI certification, which includes the EXO certification, is launching in August. And then the AI challenge, which is going to have over 100 companies around the world competing for over $100,000 in prize money, together with basically the Genius Awards, which we're going to then be presenting at Finance Week on their AI Day, which is happening in Abu Dhabi in December. This basically is going to be leading us all the way through the rest of this year, which is very, very exciting. And a really big part of all of this was by really realizing, look, it's more than just it's more than just an individual joining a podcast like this and joining our global community. It's companies and even governments doing this at a local level, right? So the whole Genius City concept is one in which we actually say, let's actually turn a city into an exponential organization. Let's have the city have its own MTP. Let's make sure that you can actually tap into the interfaces, dashboards, experimentation through the challenges we run, have its own local community, but at the same time, tap into an AI talent marketplace, right? With staff on demand, right? Tap into all the best learning with community and crowd. So basically build into all of this. So this is the template. And EXO 2.0 just came out, which those of you who listen to me and Celine talk about that, this is all basically about if you're going to swarm, you better swarm in a network effect, or at least swarm in a non-hierarchical way where it's some CEO or board telling everyone what to do, but where everyone can basically come in and ideate to get to this. And that kind of like brings me down to what EXO has done very, very well, which is to put these case studies together. So here's Procter & Gamble, for example, where Procter & Gamble said, look, can you help us? EXO went in with their team. They said, okay, we're going to start by basically having, to begin with, an all hands meet, right? Which basically was their awake session. We're then going to have within this swarm, different teams that get put together that can then actually work at the edge of the company to put together their best ideas of how to disrupt the company itself. Put those sprints in place so that over the next 3 months, as you can see here, they launched 25 new initiatives, 8 of which are now on track to deliver plus $50 million in value each, or a 10x lift in customer satisfaction. And so basically you can have measurable ROI on your learning as you then put this in place. And there's there's many examples like this where basically the results we're talking about are in multiple millions of dollars that actually this can have an impact on. So I would love for us to just take each of these one by one and just walk through the reason most companies don't do this, even startups, why they have a challenge doing these, and what happens once you actually start putting these 3 steps in place. Maybe we can start, Stuart, with the swarm and the importance of a community or a network. You've had so much experience with YPO, with Summit, and with other networks where it's the community that drives it, and why it's so important to actually be starting from there, but then also to have those same thought processes there within your company when it comes to swarm. Like I see a lot of CEOs, they'll go into a community, they get how to contribute when they're in that community, they go back to their company and it becomes command and control again, and they wonder why they can't actually, basically nurture innovation or even encourage the top innovators to actually want to take a risk at that swarm phase, so that everyone who's listening can see where they might already be taking away some tips for them to put back into the company straight away.
Well, it's definitely a bit of a hive mind kind of approach if you think about it, right? These old CNC top-down structures probably weren't functioning really well even pre-AI, to be honest, in the world of the real internet boom. But now it's been proven just very openly that the amount of information out there, open is beating closed. There's just no doubt about it. And so organizations that have yet to embrace that will find significant multipliers in velocity and opportunity the moment they start to make those decisions. That does have a legacy challenge, and sometimes it's a legacy mindset. And again, mindset is everything. We talk about that a lot. But I think that the concept of swarm is not just within an organization, but what we do really well is we bring members of our community together, Roger, who have similar interests, similar concerns, but divergent thinking methodologies about how to do that. And that brings in a whole bunch of out-of-band stuff. And, we talk about it just a bit in the AI Ready workshop, where we do some actual AI training. If you remember, if you prompt really well, you don't prompt in one block, you prompt in sequence and stack. Why? Because you actually want the AI to revert back to you as a team would, with discovery, with learnings, even with hallucinations, which in many parts can be really helpful because it's thinking out of band. Now you have to decide, just as you would with any team, what you're going to take and not take, where you're going to focus. But in a swarm mentality, we bring that to bear on a common problem, and then we allow that hive mind to kind of breathe energy and space and ideation into that. We then focus it and triage it, so you can come out with a really clear kind of crowdsourced view, which is both in band and out of band. And the real thing that's important there, and you mentioned it in the map, is to know the difference between core and edge. There are things that are core for companies. For example, if you're a national sports franchise, for example, in basketball or football, maybe, core for you might be your team and performance and like winning the Stanley Cup or winning the NFL. But, other parts of the business are core, like ticket sales and marketing and customer engagement and merchandise. And these are all different things. But what we don't realize is that many organizations, sometimes they find their biggest value is not actually in what they thought was core, it's on edge. And, Amazon Web Services is the best example. When Jeff launched Amazon Web Services, it was a sidecar to his primary business. Now it's 70% of their revenue. You look at Nestle. Nestle knew for a long time that it wanted to have a coffee business. Coffee and chocolate go well together. But for the better part of almost a decade and 3 iterations, they tried to birth a coffee business inside Nestle. And all of the antibodies killed it. They said, that's not working. We don't have the resources. I have better things to do. I've got another priority and a commitment. The moment they took that and put it on the edge, and they kind of stuffed it with, we sometimes laugh, but say, those crazy, diabolical, lovely people in your company that really think a little bit outside the box and that you love, but you kind of need a place for them. And when you put those people on the edge and you give them agency and support, and that's what a swarm does, it identifies your edge opportunities. Suddenly Nestle creates Nespresso, and now Nespresso's its own unicorn, and there's one in almost every hotel room in the world. So often our experience is when you do that really well, Roger, you end up with an edge, which often becomes so big, it sometimes even consumes the core. It is the next industry, and that's like Amazon Web. And so the swarm is not just a marginal increase, it's actually an opportunity for you to rethink, reevaluate, reframe, and then ultimately make some very smart decisions about what you're going to move forward with, but in an agile manner. We talked about that earlier. Has to be agile because the market's moving so quickly that if you can't iterate, test, get it out to market quickly enough, the traditional process will leave you far, far behind. So I think when you know how to do that well, you can then bring in sprint. Sprint, it actually happens after that. A lot of people think sprint, but sprint is such a ubiquitous word. But in our world at OpenEXO and Genius, what it means is now you have that idea. Now you've done that filtering. You've done the prioritization. You've got that nugget that you can understand the value of. You've placed it correctly, probably at the edge. But then what you need world-class people that have a system, a framework, and a process that's been proven to help you take that through a very structured, very rapid, very growth-oriented, and very agile approach. And I'll give you an example. We wouldn't be much of an EXO if we didn't eat our own cooking and act like the companies we advise. And so when I came up with AI Ready, which was our community needs us, there's nothing out in the market, we looked at an organization and said, we need to build one. And you might remember the story, but it wasn't long ago, 6 weeks ago, I said to the group, okay, I'm going to build out the framework. And we ran a 48-hour company-wide sprint, 12 time zones. We had 40 Zoom meetings, all AI recorded, all driving deliverables. We had an entire 48 hours of continuous sprint. As the sun came up and went down, it rotated around the planet. And 48 hours later, we had designed, built, delivered, codified, built out the training, the learning management requirements, the assessment methodologies. We understood the impact. We built out our KPIs for it. And literally the product went into beta test with a customer the week after. That is how the world has to move now. You can't take 6 months to create an AI ready because by the time you would have done it, you wouldn't have solved the market need. And so that is a perfect example of understanding. We took it, created a space for it to breathe, gave it the resource and support, ran it really agilely, and then brought it to market, and it's had an extraordinary reception because it landed at exactly the right time rather than too late.
I just on that swarm and sprint, I just want to share this for a moment because I think it's so critical. The main way that even startups try and figure out how to implement something or put something in place is they'll go, okay, I need to find an expert that can help me in this area. And a lot of people are trying to do that with AI, which is a little bit like me saying, okay, you want to go from horsepower to 1,000 horsepower. It doesn't happen by taking a horse and putting wheels on it or taking a horse and putting an engine in it. It happens by getting off the horse and getting in a car, right? And it's a whole different vehicle. And so there's a whole shift right now, and we're not talking about 1 horsepower to 1,000 horsepower. We're talking about 1 human power to 1,000 human power, right? Like if anyone says, okay, how do I just put AI in my business? They're asking the wrong question. If on the other hand, you say, okay, I'm going to swarm with the right people, my customers, everyone, and say, if we were to use AI in a particular area of my business to 10x something, what would it be? Would it be to 10x customer satisfaction? And would it be to 10x repeat business? Would it be to 10x new business? You choose something in the swarm, which becomes the challenge. Then you've got something worth sprinting for, and you'll get into the sprint without even knowing how you're going to solve it. You just know that during the time that you're actually sprinting, you're going to find a solution, right? And you always will if you actually have a much better question that you're asking. And so this whole aspect of basically whether you're individual, whether you're a team, whether you're an enterprise, going through this pathway, and this is really what we're doing right now with the fact that we're doing this on a global level. Getting the people certified that can then actually then deliver for the larger companies, having the larger companies and corporations as well as schools and startups involved in a challenge where they're each defining what is going to be the use case of AI, and then they're going to go out there and basically see if they can achieve it or not. And those that do the best job will then be recognized with their own Genius Awards and also with their success stories becoming guideposts for others to be able to follow as well. So each of the cities will build their own ecosystem as they go too. Everyone's going to see what is coming. And now for everyone on this podcast, you'll see what this pathway is and how, whether it's an individual or team or enterprise, you can follow this pathway along the way as well, right? So this is all the information that for all of you that are interested, our team, how to get in contact with us. If you want to run a city, you can do that too. That's all part of this too. But that then all leads to the third part, which is the scale, right? Because if you can do this 4 times a year, like, every 3 months, be running a sprint, or you get as good as Stuart and his team are, where you can do it in 48 hours and basically ideate with an entire team and come up with something far superior than what one individual product manager can develop on their own. Then you get to the third part, which is scaling. Do you want to talk to that for a moment as to the companies you've seen do the best job when it comes to scale and why so many fail at this third step?
That's a great question. And, it's interesting. I think there's some organizations that have created their own venture studios and their own arms where they're getting better at scaling. And there's some that haven't yet really thought through what it takes in order to scale well. When we work with organizations, one of the things that we think is fundamental is that the organization is scaling it, not some third party, right? And the best way for them to do that is to ensure that their team has come along on the journey, because you can't run a swarm and do this incredible sprint with all this ideation and then hand it like a baby to a team that doesn't actually now know what to do with it. It's like passing a baton to someone. They haven't even put running shoes on. They don't know what the track looks like. They don't even know what direction to run in, right? And so if you look at that problem statement, we know that corporate innovation historically, according to a Harvard Business Review, 72%, Roger, of corporate-led innovation has failed. We know that CB Insight says that almost $3.5 trillion, of wasted effort has been thrown at corporate innovation when it wasn't done well. And so if you look at the scale of that challenge, what is really important are these other systems that run with it, like the LMS, like the universities, like the micro schools, because the whole intent of them is to bring a larger segment of the team that's ultimately going to receive that baton to be in a position to not just feel comfortable receiving it, not be fearful of it, know they've got the agency. I say that a lot, but that's critical. There's so much importance about them feeling empowered to run with it. And that shows up in engagement and in productivity and a whole bunch of other things that there's a lot of neuroscience and organizational behavior in. But when you do it with a trained group, and especially if they've gone through the EXO foundations, they know the process of how to do that, there's now a roadmap for them to follow. And KPIs can then be very appropriately assigned and then managed on a dashboard and monitored. And this is why when people look at that brain diagram, it's not a surprise you see a thing like a dashboard on there, because like, right, we have to measure it. If we can't measure it, Drucker, we can't change it. We've got to have a place we can check on it. But we have to be very focused on what we do. How do we do that? Great. Autonomy. We have to have groups that can work autonomously together, but be able to work independently to come back together and collaborate. We have to do it with leveraged assets. For example, we can't do it all alone. Oh, we're a hire company. All we used to do is hire people. We don't have that asset. Oh, we got a problem, rather than where can we go find that asset and leverage and bring it in, staff on demand. And so that diagram of the 10 attributes is actually the operating system. So think like a company gets this incredible opportunity, but they haven't moved to like a modern Mac OS and they don't have all the tools that are there. But suddenly you bring a team up that's been trained on that. And now they've got a machine that's not just sitting occupying desk space, but is effectively its own accelerator. When done well, I've found the following, which is really interesting. The first time an organization does it, they do that scale part supported by our team, but kind of in a, I don't know if you know the saying from medical school, watch one, do one, teach one. You can kind of see one happen the very next moment you're doing one. And by after that, you should be a master, you should be teaching it. So in that first scale, they're kind of watching it and they're doing it with our support. But our goal is to bring that group to the level so the second time they're doing another sprint that goes to scale, now they've got their own teachers. So it's very much teach them to fish kind of mentality and approach. And that is why many of them will end up with their own venture studios self-running this after 1 or 2 iterations. And so we actually see an increase in throughput of about 10x and a reduction in investment of time and treasure of about 10x in each successive wave. So going back to that surfing analogy, when we work with organizations, our goal isn't to try and feed them like a big four and charge for it. Our goal is to actually make them brilliant at it themselves, right?
Yep.
So scaling is this art form of actually bringing the team along on the journey so they can actually run it in the future. As little supported as needed, And that does involve all the kinds of work that, we're building with you in terms of those individual, team, and enterprise training. And like that's a critical part, in my view, of how you do it really, really well for the company. I hope that answers the question.
It totally does. I mean, you just described a luck machine. you know, you got from writing about luck to actually building luck machines. I think this is what's the future, right? Like, for sure. And it's where all humans are going to want to go work. In fact, it's where all AI is going to go want to work as well, right? Because that's where you're making the biggest difference, and there's constant innovation, and you're never out of date because you're always basically asking yourself how to, like, start from day one again, which I think is amazing. Which brings me full circle, because in a moment, Michelle's going to come on and go through the Shine Awards and our community. You've just had this experience, when we were in Abu Dhabi, the fact that, the head of the AI implementation into the government was there and saying, okay, like, we've got to make this now happen across, all of UAE. You met, I was obviously there with you at UAE, whereas you went on to Kazakhstan, and you saw at the level of an entire government globally, like, nationwide, how they were now basically so intent on making this happen as well. The whole world is not equal at this point. As they say, the future exists, it's just not evenly distributed. There are certain places, like the federal government in the US, which are so far behind that there are cities like Miami or like Austin that are ahead of the curve, and people are moving to these different places. And there's absolutely what's happening in Singapore, is absolutely happening with Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I'd love you to just share with those who have not been to some of these places, and so they're not aware of just how to me, it's almost like when electricity shows up, it's one thing for someone to see a light bulb, it's another thing for someone to see an entire city being electrified and going, oh my God, that's the future, right? And we're seeing this now happening with intelligence. We're seeing those that are actually taking the fastest actions are the ones that already are way, way, way ahead. And they're getting all the investment, they're getting all of the brain power, and they're already like miles ahead of the competition as well. Your experience being in these areas, being a catalyst to it, because they're obviously all interested in everything that you and Salim have to share. But at the same time, you're seeing a different reception in your experience there as well. I'd love for you to speak about that, and if there's any personal anecdotes from your time over the last week and a half, that would be fabulous.
Thank you for that. In fact, I was just quickly Googling one of my favorite quotes because I wanted to attribute it correctly. Margaret Mead's quote, and I'll just read it out to you, Roger, and for everyone listening in. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And if you just reflect on that, nation states historically, like that's been for, a couple of centuries, has kind of been the way in which stuff was getting done. I don't think it takes a massive scholar of the world today to start to question that theory. Even the supranational systems, the UNs and everything in the EUs are under assault, as we know. And I'm not going to get into political construct with you, but when you bring that down to like a city or city-state level, suddenly you've got a small group, relativistically, of individuals that can change the world. And the future, and Salim talks about on stage, but it's also showing up all over, is that the mobilization at scale, but of a containerized area that people can actually budget, drive, win support in, galvanize an economy, galvanize their own kind of city level GDP, invest in appropriately, resource appropriately, is just an extraordinary like update to kind of that operating system of what we've historically seen. We are seeing, interestingly enough, that there are many markets in the world which are leapfrogging some of the incumbents, if you will, because of their agility. Singapore, I mean, it's not a small one as an example, but if you move to some of the other areas, there are certainly reference names out there. And, we can see it in what's happening in Abu Dhabi. But for example, we've just spent the last week here in Kazakhstan, Astana being the principal capital city, the kind of the heartbeat of government and business, Almaty being kind of the younger, rapidly changing, evolving part. Both of those cities are in their own rights the future of kind of the movement of the mobilization of energy and resources, organizationally and government, to really make change happen there quickly. You'll know I'm from the country of Bermuda, and Bermuda was the first country in the world, again, small enough to be considered effectively like a city, if you think about it, to actually write digital asset legislation to cover all crypto, all digital asset rights, or DAOs. And it did it in such a pace of time that no other country in the world came even close to how quickly we regulated it. And so I think the opportunity right now is favoring these more agile, committed organizational structures. And I think the city structure is compelling because it's also got enough depth to have really meaningful impact. So as we see language models move from LLMs to country level OLMs to city OLMs to organizational LLMs, we're seeing, for example, right now here in Kazakhstan, a partnership already announced a couple of days ago between some of the largest businesses in the country and the OpenEXO and Genius to actually build an institute for the future, for the change of the country, based on digital assets, based on tokenization, based on LLMs, based on green energy, based on mining and AI and an AI empowerment, because they literally have the wherewithal, the intent, the funding and the motivation, and now, fortunately, with our partnership, the resourcing and the framework to do that and do it well and do it quickly. And so I think the brightest lights in the future are going to be not indistinguishable from that map. If you look at kind of the world, Roger, from a satellite, you don't see nations. What do you see? You see density of light in what? City centers, right? So if you think of that concept, we're going to be looking at the world from that kind of lens of where is the AI power, where is the access to affordable, green, well-sourced energy, where is the code of ethics and conduct, where is the governmental permission structures to enable rapid growth and investment. And when that happens, I think what we're going to see is that it's going to trend towards the best part of what we can do, because you're mobilizing people to work together to a common purpose. And it's much less political. There's much less that can go wrong from kind of, if you look at the US election, like the push me, pull you of every 4 years, we know what happens. You look what's happening in France. Those disrupt the cycles of growth and change and creation. And if you can get that done at a city level without that level of disruption, I think you can have an extraordinary impact.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And yeah, we are absolutely moving into economies of speed over economies of scale, right? It's so much about that. When the waves are big enough as they are, then the surfer better be nimble and better move with it and know when to get off the wave they're on to get onto the next one, because they keep on coming. And as you said, 20 Gutenberg moments, that like each one of these are multi-trillion-dollar waves that are coming down upon us. So I want to say a huge thank you, Stuart. Well, especially because you've been in bed for a couple of days, and so being able to recover enough to be here and join us, really, really appreciate it. We're gonna jump off now and give Michelle a chance to share the Shine Awards. But it's been fabulous connecting as always. Look forward next time we're seeing each other in person again. And thanks again so much for being here as our speaker this month.
Absolutely loved it. Appreciate you inviting me. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you. And Michelle, handing it over to you now.
Everybody, thanks, Roger. Thanks, Stuart. That was a great call. It was really, really good to see the things that you can do to supercharge your business in taking AI into consideration and unlocking the future, right? This is what everything's about at the moment. So it gives me great pleasure today to announce the GEM Awards on the back of that. And let me share my screen as we do. We have the awards for July. And yes, we're in July. Can you believe it? Halfway through the year. And as you know, these are the awards where we actually always awarding our partners, our clients for innovation, the courage to embrace certain things, to do things differently. And I'm super proud to announce these nominations. We obviously have the prizes, which you guys know, and the team will reach out to. But the nominees for today's call is Sandy Herrera and Dr. Stacey Herrera, Paushal Tashi, Naral, and Osman. And these are the stories that we've got here. From my side, Sandy and Stacey are our level 3 faculty partners from Humanize EDU. And they're very inspiring women. They're making an impact in education. They're passionate about transforming schools and creating a culture of nurturing and positivity in different schools. They're working tirelessly, and it's really, really amazing to what they're achieving. So I'm going to play you a video for a change. on this testimonial, because for me, it was the words that Stacey actually was saying and how she was explaining her story, which was amazing. So here we go.
Licensed clinical social worker, and she and Dr. Darcy Lord and I do a lot of like meditations and gatherings and whatever. And it was 2 or 3 years ago where she was sharing that she wanted to run groups and infuse kids with all of the love of themselves and all these strategies and all these things. And she always says that when she says something and I get this look in my eye, it scares her. So I was like, oh, we can do that. So been a couple of years in the making, but she created this week-long series of workshops for kids. We this last year connected with Sunshine from Darkness, which is a nonprofit agency. So this nonprofit funded it, paid everybody really well. We were able to deliver it at Boys and Girls Club, which is a summer camp and after school program that's geared towards like everyone, but they have a lot of supports for lower socioeconomic families. And so they were able to run a boys group last week in the morning and a girls group in the afternoon. And on Friday, we did a celebration where I showed up and the other board members from this group showed up to kind of hear what the kids had learned. And the kids like didn't want the clinicians to leave. They wanted to keep it going. Like they were so excited. The staff at the Boys and Girls Club was saying how transformational it was for these kids. And so just to go from idea to actual like event that was so impactful, and to know that everyone felt valued, right? It was amazing. It's truly amazing.
So that's the story. And I think, you know, when you do things, sometimes the results only come years after. So, you know, keep at it, keep doing the right things, and the results will come.
Licensed clinical social worker.
And let's move to the next slide. Okay, the next person that I would like to nominate is actually Poshal Tashi. Poshal joined us as a flow consultant just recently before our event in LA. She's an executive producer for the Authors Leverage, and her partner actually ran an annual business conference, which was led by using wealth dynamics for a workshop for 25 young entrepreneurs. And this was a great opportunity for them to share what they're doing and how they're helping young people, young youth, to change things, understand and leverage their strengths. So she did a presentation. Her and her partner talked about it. They've been passionate about wealth dynamics for a long, long time. And they came on as flow consultants just recently. And practical examples. The kids were amazing. They enjoyed it. The young entrepreneurs actually participated in the workshop. They had great questions. So it was such a passionate, great space for education and learning. And this is what we're about. We're about changing stuff. So the workshop was a clear success, and the feedback from the attendees was amazing. So I'm super proud that these are the impacts that we're actually having within our community. Narelle always comes to the party, and she's also one of our level 2 partners. She's the founder of Evolution Creative Arts Therapies. And at the end of the day, this has been a long in the make, right? She specializes in the areas of complex needs, disability, mental health, trauma, attachment, post-traumatic growth. And really one thing that she's added into her community is she's white labeled our Genius Team AI product for her actual pathway. And she applied for the business awards in her local area, and she entered the innovation category for the first time ever. This is the 3rd time she's applied, but for the first time, she actually received the exciting news that she's a finalist, and she's having her interview like as we speak. So we'll see the results shortly of where she comes in this. And I've dropped in the login over here, and you guys can take a look, but she's really made a massive impact in that space. Last but not least, Osman, he's also been a flow consultant for a very, very long time. Basically, he's the business owner's coach, and he helps you grow your business without chaos or confusion. He is about making magic in your business, and not about following like one fit is for everybody, right? So he loves working with teams and leaders within organizations. He's been a flow consultant for, I think, over 10 years now. And ultimately, he just joined us as a flow consultant for the next 5 years. And he's been doing a lot of one-to-one coaching, executive coaching, and he's really made a difference in the local community that he's working in. So I'm really excited to also acknowledge him because he's been around the community for a really long time. July winner is Partial. So the team will be in contact, and congratulations. And we also have the quarterly winner for April, May, and June, which we're announcing today. And that is Sandy and Dr. Stacey Herrera. And yes, I'm super proud of everybody. Well done on your nominations. I look forward to seeing big results in the next month and the next 6 months. And yeah, congratulations, everybody, and have a great day.